Recording in progress.
GCIS, the MDDA, Sentech, and the SABC, given what I've raised about the ICASA request. With the Deputy Minister still present, as we start with the GCIS, would allow you to do a brief overview, but also take the committee that are important also for South Africans in that regard. Otherwise, the members would have received the presentations, as confirmed also by Honorable Masoni, that they have had the time to go through. I'm going to be in that way a bit strict with regard to time, that your presentation with the MDDA shouldn't exceed the 30 minutes. So it means to share that, emphasizing the points you want to emphasize. So that excludes your opening overview, Deputy Minister. And then before by the next presentation, the Sentech one, it's also being quite the SABC the same, and then we get to engage the presentations. So we'll have enough time for members to interrogate before we get to that last item on the remuneration. Right. Can I then give over to the Deputy Minister first, and then would then get to the presentations. Deputy Minister, Taung, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity, members of the Portfolio Committee, Chairperson of the MDDA Board, Executive Managers of GCIS, MDDA, Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, and Sentech. Good morning. In South Africa since 1994, state-owned companies are a significant vehicle for achieving transformation, economic growth, job creation, and poverty reduction. The National Development Plan Vision 2030 in particular identifies SOEs as a major driving force for service delivery and structural development. In addition, Chapter 14 of the NDP identifies that the creative industry, which broadcasting and media is part, as a vital for job creation, unemployment, skills development, and poverty alleviation. The Media Development and Diversity Agency, as an implementing arm of government, find its work premises on the 6 administrations' media-term strategic framework priorities such as social cohesion and safer communities, as well as economic transformation and job creation. The MDDA's response to this priority include funding of community media, radio, televisions, and printing media outlets to promote diversity of opinions and plurality of views by supporting the development of the community media sector in the country. It should be noted that this funding excludes historical debt. The legislative mandate of Sentech is to provide broadcasting signal distribution for broadcasting licenses, and the entity provides transmission service to more than 154 community broadcasters countrywide. Sentech, in line with Section 62, number 3 of the Electronic Communications Act, read with the Sentech Act, provides a business objective of businesses' sustainability to enable the entity to achieve universal access to broadcasting infrastructure. Due to the discontinuation of government's initiative support scheme, which paid for community broadcasters in 2016, Many community radio stations have been facing sustainability challenges of not being able to pay for signal distribution service consumed as per the contracts. Revenues billed by Sentech to community broadcasters for service rendered has not been collectible for years, and the total debt now stands at over 92 million. Chairperson, I will then hand over for a detailed report to the chairperson of the MDDA, Professor Matebula, and the person who's standing for acting DG, which is the DDG of Content Processing and Dissemination, also responsible for entity oversight, Mayor Khomoditswe Mavimbela. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, M. Can I please request for screen sharing rights for the GCIS presentation? Thank you. The presentation visible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I will do this in 15 minutes, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the presentation summarizes what we have been requested to address in terms of the what GCIS and the ministry has done in terms of intervening with regards to the signal fees that has been emanated by Sentech. And just the summary of the presentation is just the background on GCIS. I'll skip on that, the priorities, so that there's a linkage of GCIS and MDDA, the overview of community media, signal distribution debt owed, just the context on that, what we have done, and propose short-term and long-term solutions. The mandate of GCIS, as known, was established to provide strategic leadership to government communications, to ensure coherence, coordination, and consistent quality that will impact and provide a responsive government to the citizens. And this is provided through a twin mandate to provide information to citizens so that they can improve their lives, and also to coordinate, guide, and lead the government-wide communications. And this will bring the context of why we are including this discussion of community media in this. And how this links to the 6th administration priorities through priority 7 of better Africa and better world. All the priorities are addressed there, and basically, in summary, it's disseminating the information for public interest and providing local content through community media, and also through priority 6, increase access to government service, and to ensure that we provide a framework that uses technology to provide that information. And in terms of the sectors, to provide the media diversity and plurality of voice, and to ensure that there is transformation of the sector, which is monitored by the minister. And this is done through the MEC Charter Council. And just an overview of community media. Currently, we have 284 community radio stations and televisions. There's 5 of them. 21 are commercial, and the others are free to air. There's subscription services, and there's 5 recent additional ones, which are subscription to services and public broadcaster, with 15 radio stations and 2 commercial TV stations. And the bottom just gives an overview of the history since 1994, and the community media has a 25% market share, and 6% of that is occupied by commercial TV. And on the left, we can see where the split is. Mostly it's radio, and Limpopo 26. I'll pick the ones with the highest numbers. Eastern Cape with 23 radio stations, and KwaZulu-Natal with 20. And the number of projects so far is 327. And the map below just gives a visual depiction of where this concentration is at. And just going on to the challenges that the community broadcasts are faced with, going through the history. So community media in MDDA will be celebrating 20 and 30 years, respectively. So 20 years of MDDA in the country will be going through 30 years of democracy. And out of the 230 community broadcasters, 154 of those are not sustainable, and they owe 92 million to Sentech. So that is the bulk of the community stations. And the revenue bill by Sentech to community broadcasters has not been collected for years. And the MDDA Act provides on criteria for selection of projects to support. And it is also important to note that the funding of MDDA, 60% of it goes to community radio, and 25% goes to small commercial media, and 5% for research and training, and 10% is unallocated. The professor will outline more on that split. And the funds from broadcast media, the funds that is collected, that is levied by the public and commercial broadcasters, is spent on projects. And the print media sector has not been spending on print media projects, and they stopped actually contributing in 2013, 2014, also posing that their operations are constrained and they cannot afford to fund anymore. Just continue on those challenges and what GCIS and the ministry has been able to do. We are aware of the challenges, and GCI has been engaging both Sentech and MDDA on this matter. And in 2022, the debt was at 82 million, and now we are aware that it's risen to 92 million. And GCIS participated through an invitation from Sentech in roundtables that were held across the country. And the aim of the sessions were to discuss the possible policy, legislations, and regulatory measures to take forward a sustainable signal distribution service provision. And in addition, we have, as GCIS, have taken upon ourselves to meet with the sector, with NCRF, AIP, and SACRO, and to engage them on this matter to understand the challenges further. And the community broadcasters in those meetings, they've raised other issues which will bring about sustainability to their operations, which is the 30% ad spend by government community media, and also funds that are owed by them to SAMRO and SAPRA. So this challenge of the Sentech signal distribution is not the only challenge that they face. They also face other challenges. Also included to that is the digital migration policy, and also audience figures, which sometimes prevent them from being able to harness the critical advertising funds. The proposed solutions in realizing this debt is that the truth is that government cannot afford to not have community media, especially now during the upcoming elections. And the immediate solutions that we have posed to ministers is that the two ministers of Presidency in charge of MDDA and the Minister of DCDT that they look at provisions of Section 88(1)A of the Electronic Communications Act to tap onto universal access funds to fund the signal distribution debt, and that USAF also must be utilized for payment of subsidies for needy persons towards the cost of the use of broadcasting, and also to determine the status of ICASA's response after Sentech made submission on how to ensure the differentiation can be expressed in the tariff structure. And also what we propose the discussion to focus on is the draft Digital Development Fund and the draft white paper on audiovisual content that will address the digital migration, and also the percentage that is levied towards the community media, that it be increased from 0.1% to either 1 or 2% in line with ITU recommendations. The long-term solutions can be addressed through the MEC Charter Council. The item is to be discussed with Minister this Thursday, and through the council we can there's a proposed BEE schedule that will be posted on the sector, and this will also compel the industry-wide, not just government, to channel advertising funds towards community media and also bring about sustainability in that sector. Another long-term solution is we've tabled a white paper on modernization of government communications that is along with the MEC Charter sector code. This will be in discussion with the minister, and this framing and green paper policy will also see to the compliance on government advertising spend that will compel government departments also to channel up to 30% of their funds, of their budgets towards community media. And that's just a summary of the chapters in the green paper. And the one that we are concentrating on is that the centralized media procurement, which speaks to media buying, and 30% to be allocated to community media. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Would have the MDDA.
Yeah, Chairperson and members of the committee, Deputy Minister, and colleagues, thanks so much for this opportunity. I'm not going to waste time. I think what I will do is I'll ask this acting CEO to cover just about 4 slides, as that will crystallize the matter that we are in front of the committee about. I think DDG Reho did cover some of the areas, and I'm asking that we cover at least 4 slides, and then I'll come back when we do take questions to emphasize here and there about matters that I think that the committee needs to engage itself with. Acting CEO.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning, Chair of the committee and committee members, deputy ministers, and executives from the various entities. Yolanda, can you please flag the presentation? Thank you once again. The background has really been set by the GCIS as our shareholder department. And what I would wish to emphasize is the issues in the main that confront the sector, which impact directly on the ability to be sustainable. And by being sustainable, the ability to self-fund the Sentech transmission fees. The sector is still reeling from the effects of COVID. Load shedding has presented additional challenges. There are limited access to resources which are directly linked to the ability to source funding, advertising revenue, as well as support from the localities in which they are based. There are some provinces that have seen that have less representation in terms of community media, and anecdotally, we've seen that the correlation between the representation of stations in those areas correlates with the extent of the economic activity in and around the stations. Next slide, please. In addition, many community media outlets have struggled to transition to digital platforms and thereby taking advantages of the opportunities that are offered by the internet and social media. There is a challenge of training and capacity building, and while that is one of our core areas of focus as the MDDA, the budget which is assigned to that makes it extremely difficult to have the desired impact in ensuring that the requisite skills and capacity building opportunities are availed broadly to the sector. Could you move to slide? Thank you. Over the last 20 years, the MDDA has issued over 500 grants, and this figure is split between both broadcasters and the print media sector. If one were to then break it down in terms of the broadcasters directly that have been funded, the figure is 143. And of that 143 that have been funded in the last 20 years, 124 are still on air. The misalignment between the figures speaks to the revolving door syndrome. Because of issues of sustainability, we see that repeatedly every couple of years we are funding the same stations because of capital equipment upgrades, but also because they are unable to sustain themselves. Compliance is a pervasive challenge, and when proposals such as increased media buying from government are put on the table, you would find that compliance then impedes these community broadcasters from actually participating in such opportunities. And primarily compliance is in relation to SARS, as well as the Department of Social Development. Community media stations must be registered and not as non-profit organizations, and there are obligations that are imposed by the Social Development Act in terms of reporting obligations to the Department of Social Development, which if those obligations are not met, the stations are then rendered non-compliant. Next slide. Thank you. If one then looks at the stations that have been funded by the MDDA in respect of the last 3 years, the profile breakdown in respect of the different districts per province is as follows. We have funded 8 stations in the Western Cape, 7 in the Northwest, 18 in the Eastern Cape, 13 stations in Gauteng. Next slide. 11 in Mpumalanga, Limpopo 13, Free State 1, Northern Cape 2, and KwaZulu-Natal 14. The issue of Sentech transmission fees is that most stations are transmitting through Sentech. And this is an appealing situation because Sentech provides a service offering which includes support and immediate response. We have seen a growing trend where community broadcasters are now opting for self-transmission with the argument that this is more cost-effective. However, this does carry the risk of no structured support, and it really is an interim short-term gain. The current sector debt for Sentech is sitting, as at the end of August, at just over 91 million. And this cuts across stations that are funded and not funded by the MDDA. Of significance is that 94.5% of this amount has been outstanding for more than 120 days, which means that these stations are at the risk of switch off. And Sentech does require a 40% payment against this 91,000 to prevent community radio stations from being switched off. And from a sectoral context, this equates to just over 36 36 million. The matter has been escalated to the Minister in the Presidency, and as reported by the GCIS, is receiving attention jointly between the Ministers of Communication and Digital Technologies and the Presidency. And there are a series of short-term solutions that have been put on the table. For the most part, the lowest hanging fruit would be for the payment of this 40%, which would then enable not just the abeyance of the switch-off process, but would also enable more stations to then participate in a debt restructuring process with Sentech, and therefore those to be on air. I would wish to emphasize the issue of, the funding that has been made available by the MDDA over the last 3 years. And already we are seeing stations that have been funded as recently as the last 3 years already being off air. We have a target to fund 20 community radio stations or community TV stations for the 2023-24, as well as to unveil 10 stations that have been funded in the last 3 years. And both of these targets are now at risk because should these stations be switched off, they become ineligible for funding from the MDDA in the current funding cycle. And you really cannot unveil a recently revamped station if that station is already off air. Next slide, please. The implications for the national elections of this situation is that if Sentech does continue to initiate the switch off at a rate of 2 stations per month, as previously indicated to the MDDA, we will have a situation where there is limited community media representation and ability to provide information to communities leading up to the elections. Stations that are switched off are unable to participate in political election broadcasts, and they would also not be able to leverage off political adverts, which are a popular economic stream in any election season. Importantly, local communities would then not be in a position to provide election programming, particularly in indigenous languages, and considering that the primary language that is used by mainstream media is English, it presents additional disadvantages to communities on the ground in accessing information related to the elections in languages of their choice. As has been previously indicated, the matter has been escalated. We are in constant communication with Sentech, and we are hoping that a short-term solution will be found sooner rather than later to enable the payment of the 40%, equating to just over 36 million, to enable a moratorium on the switch-off the switch-offs that are currently underway. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, MDDA. I will now get the SABC and Sentech.
Thank you, Chair. Am I audible, Chair?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
I would.
Thank you, Chair. I would want to invite the CEO of Sentech to make a presentation. I'll come back. He said they will would present. I'll come back when we take questions. If you can come in, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to you, Honorable Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Portfolio Committee members, Deputy Ministers, DGs, and colleagues from the industry. Chairperson, we make a presentation. Maybe can I just ask for the sharing rights so I can share? Alternatively, coordinating colleagues can share the presentation on your side.
You are able to share, Mr. Leshope. You have the rights.
Okay. Just let me know when you can see the presentation.
The presentation is on the screen, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, we've put together a presentation, Chairperson, covering three key areas of engagement: update on the mediation between the SABC and Sentech on tariffs, the community broadcasters' debt, and then our readiness for election, Chairperson, as requested by the committee. We've put together a few slides. We also make an assumption that the slide has been read. So on each of the slides, we'll just be reflecting on some of the salient issues we want to bring to the attention of the committee. In terms of the SABC tariff and the mediation process, the SABC lodged a complaint with the Competition Commission. Similarly, the same was submitted to ICASA. The process is underway, and previously the department, through the then Deputy Minister, started a process to intervene. And on the next slide, we cover a bit more detail in terms of that process. So we went to the Competition Commission with the SABC last year in November, where we agreed on a mediation process with a view of reaching an agreement on the tariffs for signal distribution, Chairperson. It was a very intensive process involving exchange of deep data that relates to contribution of the costs from Sentech sites. This information was shared with the SABC and engaged on. We also shared our tariff methodology in terms of what informs the cost structure, basically deriving from the asset cost recovery, the operating costs, which in the end results in the tariff that goes towards the SABC. This information was engaged on by the two parties, Chairperson. The two parties are a bit far apart in terms of this issue, where the SABC was proposing a tariff reduction of about 48%. And if one has just to look into the deep cost of providing signal distribution, the direct cost, what you need to produce a service, you cannot do that and still reduce the tariff by 48%, Chairperson. So that's where we are trying to reflect and share the detailed information that you have to carry this cost in the service for us to be able to provide this signal distribution services. Signal distribution is fairly a costly exercise, which will be understood in context properly. So, Chair, the amount may look very high, but that is what you have to carry: the cost of energy, cost of satellite. I mean, there's just one site in the Brixton Tower, the landmark tower there. Per month, we pay like 1 million just to energize the signals that has to travel to the viewers and household there. So that's the extent of the cost that goes into this exercise, Chairperson. So in this process, then we shared also the deep P&L specific for the SABC account, where we then said, look, at this point in time, we can discount to an amount of 12 million before analog switch off and around 13 million after analog switch off, which was around 2%. We've also been doing this proactively, Chairperson, in prior years, 21, 22. We have been giving discounts where we saw that there were some possibilities on the account or the P&L of the SABC. However, this discussion, Chairperson, did not yield an outcome at the Competition Commission. And then subsequently, the two boards met, Chairperson, in August, and a decision by the two boards was made that this matter should also be explored outside the Competition Commission, Chairperson. There are two subcommittee members consisting of 6 non-executives and so there are 6 members, 3 non-executives and 3 executive directors for each, to engage again once more deeply on the issue and then try to find a solution with the intention to solve this issue outside the Competition Commission. We've had a few iterations. We are exchanging information once again. targeting that towards the end of this month, early next month, we should have find finality and make final recommendations to the boards of both the SABC and Sentech on this issue. So we do want the committee to note that there are structures that are looking at this matter very closely. And as late as last night, we were engaging on this issue, Chairperson, and at the right time, we will finalize the reports for the committees, hopefully before the end of this month, Chairperson. So the matter is getting attention with the purpose or objective of resolving the matter also outside the Competition Commission process. And then with regards to community broadcasters, that Chairperson, I think our colleagues from MDDA, GCIS reflects on the issues affecting community broadcasters. We have been meeting with the MDDA colleagues, and the information they're sharing there is correct that some of the community broadcasters are unable to pay. This emanates from the funding scheme that was withdrawn in 2016, Chairperson. You know, thereafter we saw community broadcasters start to struggle and facing financial sustainability challenges. We do believe that was a critical element that carried the community broadcasters. And as a result, we will need some intervention, certainly, for us to be able to, again, bring community broadcasters back to sustainability in this order, Chairperson. We've been engaging community broadcasters. We've been engaging with MDDA. Last year, towards the end of the year, we traveled the country, going to the community broadcasters with our colleagues from MDDA and the community media forums, trying to set an understanding and establish the structures of getting community to honor their contractual obligations. And very few responded and signed and an acknowledgement of that at those sessions, and majority of them just remained. And we were left with no options, Chair and committee members, but then to enforce our account receivable policies to recover some of the debt that own. And this has led to switching off of some of the community broadcasters, Chairperson. The total debt owed sits at 91 million, where we are, Chairperson. And on this slide, we're just showing and distributing the cost or debt owed to Sentech per province and the number of customers, community broadcasters owing Sentech per province. The debt is quite old. Most of it's over 120 days. We also need cash flow from a Sentech point of view to be able to carry this cost and cover our operating costs on day-to-day basis. You'll understand our reflection on what is needed to generate the service. There is energy consumed day-to-day. There's people traveling to sites, there's costs, there's maintenance, replacement of the technology. And there are also other providers that we are using to pull content from broadcast studios to our technology and infrastructure. So in some instances, we use other providers. We have to pay them for the service. So there are day-to-day costs that has to be covered for the service to continue, Chairperson, committee members. This slide just covered the age of the debt, as we do reflect that 86 million of it is over 120 days, and total owed is 91 Chairperson. So it's quite old debt, Chair. And then here we just reflecting on the number of services that have been switched off in light of the total number of community broadcasters, those that licenses have been cancelled by ICASA, those that we've issued letters of demand, those that have agreed to restructure debt, and those that dispute this in the resolution process, Chairperson. And then in terms of those that were switched off during last year, there was a total of 69 that we had to terminate services, unfortunately, Chairperson. And 25 of those have come back to us and made arrangements, and they are back on air. However, there is still just over 40 that still has not been made arrangements to continue with their services. And we do believe that there needs to be an intervention here. Our engagement with MDDA and ICASA is with the intention that there be an intervention from outside to assist community media, hoping that towards the next elections, they will be put back on air. We closely understand and appreciate the role that community media plays in terms of diversifying the media sector and then communicating matters close to the community, their chairperson. So it is in our interest that the situation of community media improves and that there is at least sustainability in that regard, and we'll continue to contribute there. In the past, we have also contributed by discounting the community media tariff for reasons of sustainability, chairperson. So that there's a great portion of Sentech contribution towards community media sustainability in this regard. Going forward, and this model, we have been engaging with the community broadcasters and MDDA that we adopt a future operating model with the main intention of lowering the month-to-month tariff, chairperson. The model considers what contributes towards the overall tariff, being the establishment cost, the operating cost, facilities leasing cost, and all the costs associated with operating service for community media. In this model, we are proposing that the initial setup or establishment cost be paid for upfront by the funders, community media funders, community media themselves, such that the month-to-month tariff becomes lower. So the asset cost is quite a significant cost in the tariff itself. We have to recover for the cost through the tariff as well. But we realize that if we cover this cost through funding earlier, the month-to-month tariff becomes lesser. So there's about 5 new community broadcasters who we have onboarded on this model, and we believe for reasons of future sustainability, it will make the month-to-month operating costs a bit lesser. And then also on the recovery side of Sentech, it makes the risk of non-recovery a bit lesser. So it's a win-win situation for community media and Sentech, and therefore impacting both parties' sustainability positively, chairperson committee members. The last part we want to cover is the readiness as far as the elections is concerned, chairperson. We operate various platforms across the country to generate both radio and television coverage. We do this consistently, Chair. We are ready to make available our platforms for the highest availability during elections as well. Normally, ICASA publishes regulations governing the broadcasting during this period, which Sentech and the broadcasters complies with. But from the state of readiness of the infrastructure, chairperson and committee members, we would like to confirm to the committee that we are ready technically. There just needs to be the financial aspect of both community broadcasters and the SABC resolved to enable Sentech to carry its day-to-day operating cost and successfully deliver the election. Thank you, Chair.
Sentech, let's see.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to load. If I can just get rights to do that. Chair, I'm assuming that the members can see the presentation.
Yes, and presentation is on the screen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And good morning, honorable chairs and members, and my colleagues. Chair, I'm going to go just focus on one slide. So I'm going to go straight into it, and that is our costs that we currently have with Sentech. I'm not going to speak about what my colleague has already spoken on in terms of the process where we are with Competitions Commission and the board-to-board engagement. But basically, this is the current cost that we are paying to Sentech. The top one's analog TV, it's 26 million, digital DDT, 10 million, the fiber links, cross carriage, and FM radio, and then the total monthly loss of 59 million. It works out to about just over 700 million on an annual basis. Now, our case was brought before Competitions Commission and ICASA 2 years ago in August 2021, and we await the outcome of that from a Competitions Commission perspective. But while we are doing the board-to-board engagements, I think it's important to note that our case is not based on asking for a discount. It's based on right pricing, and we believe that this pricing should be reduced by 50%. So if you look at the analog network, we've already switched off 50% of the analog network. We look at DTT, we've reduced the DTT transmitters from 182 to 80. So that's already 40% that was switched off. And the rest of the analog is going to be switched off, which means that you are not replacing the asset. So the DTT asset is already in place. It has been for many, many years. It would have been written off already, and it was paid for by National Treasury. So we should not be incurring those costs, and that's why we believe that the pricing should be reduced substantially. So if you look at the current situation we find ourselves in and the impact that that could have on the elections, when we switched off the 5 provinces, we severely impacted the audiences. And as you know, eMedia did not switch off at that time. The criteria that was used was a percentage of the number of people that registered in the area, and not a number of people, the percentage of indigent people. What that means is if you have, for example, 100 indigent people in the area and nobody registered, then that would be switched off. So there was a huge impact on the audience, and we saw that impact our revenue. So with the switch off of the 5 provinces, we actually lost 5 million on an annual basis. Now you can see with that loss of revenue, with the excessive pricing from Sentech, it's about the same amount that the SABC finds itself in terms of a deficit on our budget. So if those 2 factors were corrected overnight, then we would not be in the current financial situation. Hence, the matter with Sentech is of critical importance that we resolve it. Because we can't pay this amount due to our cash flows, there is a huge outstanding debt with Sentech as well, and that is currently incurring interest as well, which if we had right-sized and right-priced this 2 years ago already, we wouldn't be sitting in this current financial situation. I think it's also important to note, and we had queries from this committee that the low-powered sites of FM radio has been switched off by Sentech, also because of a pricing dispute between the 2. And we are in discussions to see how we can bring that back, but I think that's going to be a very difficult discussion because it comes down to, again, right pricing. In terms of Sentech's argument that we should be downgrading the SLA so that we can reduce the cost, our counter argument for that is they've switched off 50% of the network already, so there's no need to downgrade anything. we should see that associated cost coming down as well. In terms of the analog project, once again, we haven't had installations of set-top boxes probably for the last year now already. The new date has been set for next year, December. We're running the risk once again of not having sufficient people being migrated to digital. And if that is the case, and we do a switch off, we're going to see the same effect as we've seen in the other 5 provinces, that you have a black on air situation and people don't have access to television at all. The 4 provinces that remains is obviously the largest in the country. It has both the largest number of indigent households, but also the largest number of analog users. And there will be a huge impact, obviously, to the economy and the country in terms of those people not having access to television, but also to the SABC, because our funding model is predominantly based on advertising revenue. And if you have a decrease in audience, you will have an associated decrease in revenue, and it will severely impact the sustainability of the organization. Chair, I hand back to you. Thank you.
Essentially, the screen. Please unshare the screen. Am I audible?
You are audible, Chairperson. Yeah, clear, very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ngoma, for that assurance. As I now proceed to take members who would want to engage with the presentation. Honorable members, can I take hands on those that want to engage with the presentation? I see the hand of Honorable Mazone, Honorable Bojani. I'll take other hands as we proceed. I see Honorable Mlala. Can we start, Honorable Mazone? You are recognized. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. For connectivity issues, I will keep my camera off so that we don't lose the sound. Chair, community radio stations are becoming increasingly important. And it really concerns me that there seems to be a sort of very blasé attitude about paying the costs to keep a community service radio going. And I'm wondering, one of the presenters said that part of the costs that they incur are for training and development. Now, in this training and development, should we not be training these local radio stations on how to develop an advertising incentive department? Because I can imagine local businesses, your local butchery, perhaps, your local clothes shop having a sale and having reasonable tariffs, but making it a lot easier for the advert to be placed on the radio. And I have been doing quite a bit of listening to local radio stations in preparation of this meeting. And what I've heard is a lot of the local radio stations, the DJ or presenter depending on what kind of show they're doing, will actually read out the ad themselves. So there's no ad production costs involved. And I'm just wondering, there's provinces like Limpopo, I think it was, that had 14 local radio stations. If it's now becoming a stage where it's becoming dangerously close to having to switch off a station due to non-payment, is there no way you could amalgamate some of these stations so that we keep local content, we keep people informed of local affairs, we keep people informed in their mother tongue languages, but at the same time we make sure that they stay on air because they're amalgamated in some form or some fashion. Then Chair, this is just a question for clarity. With SAMPRA, for example, is this like an Indicom, or does how do we include monies, and this goes, it will later be a question to the SABC too, that we pay an SABC license when we buy a TV, but that we know that most South Africans don't pay their TV licenses, and that's a huge problem. And the answer that you'll get from most South Africans is they don't pay their TV license because the content is bad. And let's be honest, the content is getting worse because local production is just unable to happen because there just isn't enough money to pay for the local contact. So, I know that there is a company called Indicom, which is the independent music company. Are they receiving dividends? I know that SAMPRA takes money from, for example, shopping centres or businesses that use radio stations in their businesses, etc., etc. Where's that money going? Is that being included in these costs that we're seeing just constantly build? So that's just a clarity seeking question. And then, Chair, I've received many, I think we all have, many people have been very concerned about Sentech's ability to operate and provide services during load shedding. And I think that this is the perfect platform for Sentech to explain to us how they're operating and how they foresee this load shedding crisis that we're in affecting their businesses more and more. And then my very last question, Chair, is the set-top boxes. These set-top boxes, I think the first tender went out for a set-top box at the end of 2011. And now we're still talking about set-top boxes. So where do we actually foresee the end of set-top boxes and this whole what I'd call a very unnecessary and wasteful saga? At the time there was a lot of controversy about tenders that were going out for the set-top boxes. So if we could just get a little bit of clarity on that too. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Mafone. And Honourable Bolavi.
Good morning, Chairperson, honourable members. Good morning to the meeting. Chairperson, I think as you listen to the presentations made by the MDDA and the GCIS, there is a great appreciation that when the NDP was formulated, there was no anticipation of the technological boom that we find ourselves in. I think at that time we were probably still on BlackBerry BBM. And we thought that was the ultimate thing. There was no anticipation of WhatsApp, of Twitter, X, whatever you call it. And this is where we are. And in responding to the need for community radio stations, the NDP is quite clear. But in 2023, we are sitting with 284 community radio stations. And the figures that we are being told today is that 154 of those are not sustainable. And I've asked the question in this committee before to say, how do we move the community radio stations so that they are moving with the times, so that we do not find ourselves in a situation where such a large number of community radio stations are reported to be not sustainable. And I am listening to the MDDA making the presentation. I'm listening to the GCIS. I'm not sure if I quite get what urgent interventions can be made to ensure that we decrease the number of 154. I really do worry about that. And you know how I hold community radio stations close to my heart. So I'm really worried about the future of community radio stations in South Africa. And moreover, if we are going to we are going to see the emergence of independent candidates coming in, I think community radio stations is exactly the place where they would be able to to sell their campaigns, as it were. And you've got a court order that says independence must come in, but you also have systems and that makes it also difficult for them to really have an equal playing field. So it's one of those things, I think, is an ongoing conversation, Chairperson, that we will continue to have with the MDDA. But what urgent interventions can be made to salvage the community radio stations? And does the Vukuzenzele newspaper feed into any community print media? Because it's also another sector that we are understanding from the presentations made this morning that is another sector that is not quite sustainable. And Vukuzenzele at least has the ability to source credible news. And I know with the radio stations, they feed into, the GCIS feeds into local radio, community radio stations. How does Vukuzenzele integrate itself in terms of the community print media? And I'm not sure if I quite understood how old the 92 million debt is, because the presentation speaks about it being historical and speaks about 120 days. But how did we get to a point where fees of 91 million rands are owed? And I do appreciate the historical context and everything, but this makes me worry to say, our entities are doing business in good faith, and good faith inverted commas, when in the end, their sustainability is threatened. How did we allow 92 million to be where it is when, and I suppose I'll also answer myself, it's a balancing act, but I really would like to be clarified on that, Chairperson. Also, training for community radio stations. When we had our symposium, we spoke greatly about misinformation, disinformation. How does MDDA plan to handle that? What training projects are going to be there? It might not necessarily be information that they readily have at hand, but also considering that we are now going to get independence, how are you going to train community radio stations so that they give equitable airtime to everybody that would be participating in the elections? And on the same breath, Chairperson, on the community radio stations, has a study being made, has an intervention being made to truly understand the biggest obstacles to the success of community radio stations? Is it a matter of them not being fully trained? Is it an issue of management? What is the biggest obstacle that is holding the community radio sector back from succeeding and filling its mandate of speaking to communities in their mother language, in their mother tongue, speaking to communities on local issues? And out of interest, Chair, I would really be interested to know what happens to equipment which would have been paid for example, by the MDDA when the stations close. Is there a resale market for those? What happens? Because, and this is the cynic in me saying, could it be a money-making scheme where people get funding and they buy the equipment and they know that there is no sense of accountability, there's no processes of accountability when the radio station closes down, and then the equipment what happens to the equipment? How do you handle that? And please explain what informed the total of 11 in the 124 asset terminal values. I'm not sure I quite understood that, so please expand on that. Chairperson, just to remind Professor Matebula that he owes this committee a report on how the matter of our visit to the MDDA was handled. And if you allow Chairperson, perhaps considering that he's had enough time to provide the report, which I have not seen, maybe at the next sitting of the portfolio committee, the report should be presented. Chairperson, I'm going to ask you for your guidance on the SABC and Sentech matter, because it seems that there is no end in sight on this. And what we are hearing from the presentation from both organizations is that the matter is now being left to the hands of the respective ministers to resolve. And the idea, Chairperson, for them to bring this to us was to if at all possible, to sponsor some ideas on how to resolve the impasse. Listening to the presentations, I am really out of ideas, Chair, and I'm going to please ask your indulgence, and if necessary, based on the answers, I could also come back on the SABC, Chairperson. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Dani. Honorable Mulala, you are recognized.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can I as well keep my camera off? And thanks, Chair. I think let me first welcome the presentation by our entities. I think the main two issues here is the issue between Sentech and SABC, one, and then the second one is the survival of the community radio stations. Maybe let me start with radio stations. The last time we did an oversight on radio stations, I think we have learned a lot. One is that most of them are not able to manage their finances properly. There were quite a number of challenges, and then I remember we did recommend that there must be some form of training and support so that we are able to sustain this diversified views in our communities. However, I'm getting a sense that thus far, 40 community radio stations have been closed and they've not even come back to make arrangements. By implication, it says they are no longer interested in continuing with the radio stations. And this is a serious blow to our local communities. We can't just leave this issue as is. My question would be then, what MDDA, what is your role here? Have you consulted with these community radio stations? Why are they not even prepared to make some form of an arrangement? We can pay now, but possibly if we stay on air for a particular period and so on. The second worry is I don't see municipalities supporting these community radio stations. I don't know what if we can have at ministerial level or at the committee level some form of interaction with local municipalities where these radio stations are located, because for me it's quite key to keep these stations alive. It's very, very important for our communities. And I don't know what role we can play to ensure that we also give support to them as a portfolio committee. Because seemingly both MDDA, the ministry, they are stuck that no, these people owe Sentech. It's like an administrative problem. For me, it's not even administrative. It's political because it involves our communities. So we can't just sit and say 40 have not come back. At least 20 something have come back, make arrangement. Their stations are open. Our objective was to increase the number of community radio stations, particularly in province where you have one. Free State, I think, is one or two, three of them. And other provinces. KZN is 14, and Limpopo, and at least there's a variety. But in other provinces, the number is quite low. Now, we can't continue then to increase the numbers when the actual number that we have is also declining. Now, on GCIS, I raised the concern that yes, Brand SA it's a very important part, though it's not in our portfolio. But you are giving in Brand SA above 200 million, and you're only giving 38 million to community radio stations. Really, I don't think this it's the correct balancing. But I'm not the minister. I can't speak on those issues. But we have recommended that we think at least increase the budget for or have some negotiations between yourself and Brand SA so that at least we can salvage some of these community radio stations. I appreciate your proposal that you're going to tap on the Universal Access Fund. If that succeeds, it's something good that we can work on. But how long will this take? Because we're approaching quite critical moment of elections, so we need vibrancy in our community. How long will this proposal take effect? And then also, I don't know if it's possible. There's also an issue of a moratorium on Sentech. What would be their response? Not to switch off the remaining ones, because if they switch all of them, then we're back to square one. Maybe they can also look at encouraging the remaining 40 to come forward. That campaign needs all of us so that they can come forward and make arrangement. At least by the time we go to elections, at least there's a variety of views across our society. And with regard to the dispute between the SABC and Sentech, what I want to know, I think the engagement, you said there's established committees, but the presentation from both sides, it looks like you guys, the more you negotiate, the more you're moving far away apart from each other. I'm getting worried about the two representation today, because as I'm listening on the SABC's presentation, they are more like saying, no, you guys must reduce your 50% of your amount of your cost, of your prices. Now, can we get to the actual estimated timelines? When are you intending to finalize? I understand the matter is also with the Competition Commission, but I wouldn't have loved that we end up there. Unfortunately, the situation does not permit, but in terms of your own internal committees, how long is this engagement going to take? if we can have an idea so that there's limit, we can't just engage forever. At some point, there must be a finality. We are agreeing or we don't agree, so that we can move on to another level. And what is the role of the political principals in this process? Because you can't just have a permanent dispute and it's not resolved. Definitely, we need a resolution of this issue. And the other issue, in the last meeting, I think I did request that we need to have a special engagement with SABC before the end of the term, Chairperson. Because there's a lot of issues that we need to raise with SABC. We can't just fold our arms and say, we bailed out SABC in the last three years. We've been very vocal, pressurizing Treasury, meeting with the committees of finance, and they had quite a good proposal. What happened to that proposal? And now we are back to the same situation at SABC. At some point, the media was saying SABC will not be able to pay their workers, and so on and so on. So, for me, two issues are very critical for me. Whether SABC will definitely need another bailout, whether we hide behind new concepts and so on. But the reality is SABC will need a new a bailout. The earlier we attend to that matter, the better. Because from the reports that we get, SABC is not financially sustainable now, where it is now. But maybe before we go to that new bailout, we need SABC to give us an extensive report about all the things that they do was going to help them revive the SABC. What happened to all of those issues? Because definitely we need to know. SABC sold all the assets, estimated to be around 4 billion. I don't know how much they sold. About half of them have been sold. SABC has fired more than 600 employees. SABC got 3.5 billion bailout. SABC, I can go on and go on and go on. Now, all this money generating strategies, where did that money go to? Still, SABC is unsustainable. So we just need to get I'm not expecting them to respond to all these issues now, but I think in details, we need an engagement with SABC because the public out there would want to know, if we gave you so much money and then you still come back, you have not changed anything, really, and we can't afford to lose the SABC, that we can. Definitely, South Africans will never accept that. So SABC, we need a serious bilateral with the committee. I don't know if the program permits, Chair, but for me, we need this issue of Sentech and SABC. We also need to go into deeper details in terms of the bailout. How much was paid to Sentech? How much did it cost? And so that in resolving this matter, it does not come back again at a time when we are unable to attend to it. So for me, that would be the most critical issues. But I'm saying let's work on the solutions for now, because we don't have time. But as much as I'm proposing that we find a solution for SABC, we also need to know what happened? What is keeping this SABC unable to rise? Is it an issue of capacity? Is it an issue of management? Is it an issue of, because in the past we used to say it's because of corruption in SABC. Now what happened now in the last 5 years? Was there another new corruption that we must investigate? What is happening? Why SABC is unable to rise to the occasion? So we can't have this situation continue. So definitely, I think, Chair, maybe in brief, let's have that bilateral engagement with SABC. I would be happy if we can have that in this term, but if it's not possible, maybe in the next term, but we definitely need to work out a plan. This is a public broadcast. I understand there's supposed to be an SABC bill. It's still stuck. It must go back to cabinet. Parliament is rising in March. Will that bill, I'm not saying they should leave it, but will it still work under the current circumstances? Will it still be finalized by Parliament? And if the reality is no, then why can't we look at other ways? In the meantime, the bill is being processed. Let's find a way of sustaining the SABC to ensure that our people do not lose a public broadcaster. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mlala. I recognize the hand of Honorable Mtakane.
Yes, Chair.
Honorable Mtakane, you are recognized. You can see
it. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and all our members and the entities. I know that some of the questions have been already posed by the colleagues. I want to make 2 points only, that I think the leadership of the entities will also assist me to understand the problem. If the entities themselves, at the senior level, they accept that the resources are getting thinner and thinner, but they still come to the committee to talk as if there are more resources available when they know that there are no resources available more. The challenges that we are facing are much bigger than the one that sometimes we present. Because if it's true that we are facing a budget problems, but they come to us, they talk as if there's money somewhere that can assist us to address this project, I think it's a bigger problem. To me, the whole question of community radios, they are located really in very poor provinces. They are very central in communicating with our masses of the people, but at the same time, they are located in areas where survival itself is very difficult. Therefore, they wouldn't have advertisers who come there and work out some of this issue. The question really that I wanted to pose, that I think the leadership of entities should assist us, is the challenge that we are facing is a policy gap or is a bigger management problem that we are facing in running the entire entities? Because if it's a policy gap, of course, the political leadership must resolve that. If it's a management issue, that is our bigger challenge. Therefore, I think the entities themselves must assist us. How are they going to address this? Because my fear always is that what we discuss today, we may even discuss it 20 years from now, if we don't really address the real issue that they think is a bigger problem. Because as Comrade Mulala was raising, that the Sentech and the SABC, the bailout, all these matters has been with us, I think, I'm not sure how many years now. The parliamentarian have been dealing with this matter every year, but they were not solving the problem on that. I wanted, because if you are in the catch-22 situation, there are radios that they have to be closed, but we say also we need them most because they are servicing the poor of the poorest. They are able to ensure that the poor in very rural provinces, at least they have information that will assist them to better their own living conditions. because without information that is empowering them, they won't be able to better their own rural living condition. I think Professor Matebul and other team that is here, they must really sometimes when they deal with us, be able to say to us, this is a policy gap problem. If we solve this problem of policy gap, therefore be able to address the problem. If it's a management issue, they must be able to say it's a management issue, it's not a policy gap problem. Because then we end up discussing a lot of the matters several times, and then you end up really with reports that are almost similar, except they change the date, but there's no progress in a visible way that is assisting us to say we are taking a leap forward. And we have recognized, I think, Comrade Chair, we have been working on this matter. We have recognized this. We have been working on this matter. We think now we are taking a leap forward. It seems we are stuck on one and the same thing for many years. I think to me, the bigger problem, I think as they comment, Chair, if you allow them, they will assist us to understand the real issue that is affecting us. Because all of us, real members and other colleagues, as we read newspapers everywhere, we know that we are facing real challenges in terms of resources. And then it seems there's no man that is going to come from the sky. As a result of that we are working in the situation which is very difficult, but what is the creative ideas that they want to present to us that then will assist us to ensure that the entire organ that we are talking about is able to function in a manner that is very efficient and is able to address the real challenges of the poor majority on the ground. To me, that's an issue, Chair, that I would really appreciate the colleagues when they respond, also to assist us to dissect exactly what is this problem. Because otherwise they will come to us, even those who are coming 7 term or 8 term, still dealing with the very same issues. If this current leadership is not able to assist us to get rid of the problems in order for us to advance more in terms of communication broadly, that is there. I think the mediation between the board, SABC and Sentech, I think they should go ahead on that. Of course, the ministers, they should also be getting involved in addressing this matter. But what has been always been very problematic, I'm saying this thing with due respect to every person, that when you move around the country, even in the very poor informal settlement, but you always find the satellite dishes. And then surely, I'm not sure why people should have that when they can't have money to pay the licenses for the SABC, or maybe the systems and mechanism and the structure of the APC is not really able to capture those people who have already want to have listened to work on the SABC to address some of the issues for entertainment, information, and also for education purposes. I think to me, they should assist us to address it. But the central point that I'm posing, Chair, is it a policy gap problem that we are facing every year, or is it a management problem? Therefore, in order for us to know exactly what we are dealing with. That's what, Chair, I wanted to make a broader comment on. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Ntagane. We now afford an opportunity to GCIS, MDDA, Sentech and the SABC to respond to questions and comments made by honorable members. I'll then come later to try and do what Honorable Bojani would have raised as guidance for us to move forward. Can I then invite, I'm not sure, Deputy Minister, whether you'd want to allow GCIS and MDDA and come later, or whether you would want to start. Let's go.
Thanks, Chair. Let me request MDDA and GCIS to respond. I will come later.
Thank you. GCIS and...
Thank you, DM. and Chairperson and members. The question by Honorable Botlani with regards to sustainability and what are the immediate measures that GCIS have put in place to address the sketch of sustainability of this community media is really towards the advertising that we are channeling, deliberately channeling towards community media. We have firstly increased the rate that is provided, the rates for an hour broadcast, for an outside broadcast, for a week-long program. And in the past, it was around 4,000 per hour broadcast. We've increased it to around 8,000. So we've almost doubled the amount. And other than that, we've increased the volumes and the spread of products that the community media can offer, as opposed to just a presenter reading out an advert or an announcement. Now we are booking more outside broadcast. We are doing more phone-in programs, drama series, and the like, so that their programming can be entertaining and provide valuable information to the citizens. And other measures are long-term, medium to long-term, that have been addressed in the presentation. With regards to Vuk'uzenzele as a community media, yes, Vuk'uzenzele, the type of content that it has is more driven towards empowering communities, as opposed to being regional or specific location focused as a print media. In the community sector, it is more national. And what we have done in terms of an intervention to integrate the content and ensure that they're included in the kind of expertise that GCIS would have, and even from the coverage of specific programs from different departments, is that we have had 2 workshops with community media in Mpumalanga and one in Gauteng. And in that, we engage them on Vuk'uzenzele and do podcasts. So we've introduced podcasts onto the platform, and it's an area that we are exploring further with the inclusion of MDDA to ensure that when we have those workshops with them, we also address not just content issues, but also issues of sustainability. The question that was asked by Honorable Mulala in terms of the funds given to Brand South Africa as opposed to MDDA, the funds that are prescribed to the entities are actually prescribed by the entities to National Treasury. So there is a letter that National Treasury would issue to us as GCIS so that we expense the funds. We don't determine or decide that this goes to Brand SA, this goes to MDDA. And as such, the motivation from Brand South Africa is that most of their programs, even though they happen internationally, is that they carry an exchange rate. So they pay in dollars or in euros to promote the reputation of South Africa internationally, and to ensure that there's inward investment coming into the country, so that there is the needed employment that will come into the country. And in terms of the Universal Access Fund, it's a proposal that we are tabling to the 2 ministers as part of the discussions that should ensue, that there be a tap into that Universal Access Fund as a short to medium term measure, and as a long term medium measure is that Universal Access Fund be increased in the Amendment Act of the ECA. Thank you.
Chairperson, let me attempt to answer a number of questions that have been posed to us relating to MDDA specifically. Let me start with the question that Honorable Ndakani poses around whether this is the bigger challenge here. Is it policy or is it administration? If you look at MDDA, Honorable Ndakani, you will see that it's operating under an act that was born in 2003. The world has changed since then. So there is, and this process has been ongoing for some time, led by GCIS to review that act, which will then be able to allow us to operate slightly differently and much more updated. So to that extent, I will say that there is an element of policy there that needs to be attended to. And I think this does as well tie in with the question that Honorable Masoni has raised around the clusterization of the various community radio stations and whether we can't look at giving specific radio stations for a much more broader space. This conversation has been happening with the minister. Again, it's a matter that must be dealt with the various other entities, for instance, in ICASA. So we can't, as MDDA, insist that there be one community radio station in a district, however much we may wish to, because presumably a particular district may be covering, even if they may not cover all the dialect, but it may cover almost similar issues that those particular communities may be covering. To give an example, you have a community radio station in Makado, you have another one in Musina, you have another one in Toyando, and you have Mala community radio stations. Those communities in that cluster potentially understand everything in one or two, in two local languages, which may be at Tsonga and Venda in that space. So ordinarily, it would have been good if you had a community radio station instead of 4 that are in that particular cluster. But we are operating within a particular legal framework that needs to be attended to be able to allow us to go into potentially a district model. But that is a future state. What we're dealing with currently is what we have, and we may have to be able to attend to that in that way. That should be able to take care of the question that Honorable Mazone has asked. Honorable Bodlane has as well dealt with the issue of the assets. What happens to the assets when a community radio station get closed? To the extent that a community radio station gets closed as a breach of the grant that we would have given them, the assets remains MDDA's assets. And those assets may be reallocated either in consultation with GCIS or in some arrangements that may be in that space. There was a question as well regarding the 91 million. How did it got to be accumulated? So 86 million of that is sitting on over 120 days, which is 95% of it. The other parts are really recent debts, which include stations that we have been able to fund in the past two to 3 years. To this extent, I think this is the only part maybe where I will say we thank Sentech for not having closed them, because if they did not allow them to run that debt, they will have closed them wholesale much more earlier than we are talking today, right? So to the extent that Sentech was very lenient in letting this debt accumulate to that level, we have to be grateful to Sentech as MDDA. But we must as well accept that MDDA's funding structure does not allow MDDA to fund the transmission fees. So that is completely separate from us. But we have tried the best we can within the 38 million that we get to assist where we could, where we were trying to safeguard the grant funding that we had given. Because if we didn't do that, we would have opened a community radio station today where we have plowed in money, and then the next 2-3 months, that station is closed. Honorable Bodlani, on the 23rd of May, I did write a report. It's sitting with the committee. I think that it's just a matter of scheduling. You will get that report. Honorable Mulala, you asked a question relating to whether these community radio stations are no longer interested, which disadvantages communities. No, it's not a question of them not being interested. Is that if you are going to go to Sentech and sign an agreement that we are going to pay, it means you must be able to honor that agreement. These community radio stations can honor those. They can't even come up front to make an arrangement, because to make an arrangement supposes that you have some ability to be able to pay. When you do not have an ability to pay, you are not going to get into an arrangement of payment. So that really boils down to exactly that. And this is the reason why, in our view, particularly leading into a year of elections, we would have pleaded with legislators to help us and help an entity like Sentech, which is trying to execute its mandate, to at least maybe lean towards a scenario where we can have a moratorium, so that when we go into elections, a broader section of our community is able to have access to election information, thereby our people are able to get that information and participate in the elections in an informed manner. So that is really where we are sitting. Chair, I'm not so sure if I may have left a question, but I think that I have answered all the questions that I have noted. If I have, I would gladly, I would like to be reminded, and I'll attempt to answer it.
Thank you, Board Chair, Prof. Matebula. I'll just check. I see there's Michael there before I go to the DM.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, and sorry to come after the Prof. And good morning, Honourable members and the Deputy Minister, Sonto. Just a quick one. I thought I'd add on, thank you to the Honourable Molala. The question that was raised about municipalities, I think is actually a very useful directive as well. Honourable Chair, I can indicate that by a large extent, through our district offices of GCIS and our partnerships with local communication forums of a municipality, etc., the community radio station features quite prominently on the map of stakeholders and target audiences of communicators of government. I think we can assure the committee that happens. But what we can also do, Honourable Chair, is I think it's worthwhile reinforcing that discussion with the provincial core teams which exist in the 9 provinces. I will be meeting with them on Friday, and I assure that this question and guidance that Honourable Molala gave, I will raise with them. But I also do agree that it's a very, very critical voice, and it's the voice that when we initiated this idea, or when we conceptualized this idea, We had hoped that municipalities would see this in that local marketing. I mean, Honorable Mazani mentioned the butcher store. I mean, this is exactly the kind of work that some of our district officers try to do, Honorable Chair, to really make the business case, the sense of a community radio, well-known to local audiences. But thank you for that. It is on the radar, but we will definitely make an effort to do more work to ensure that that is being crystallized, particularly as we build up to the public education around the election. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Michael. DM?
Before the DM comes, Chair,
You want to come back?
Yeah, my apology. There was an issue around advertising, which I did not converse much on. It really goes to the issue around, if you take away the issue around GCIS allocating to community radio stations, it's an issue around commercialization, which relate to issues around sustainability of these community radio stations. The legislative framework does not allow it. And so that is a problem. And it is something that the legislative framework that is being spearheaded by GCIS will have to address when we reach there. There was an issue around training, to train the people in the community radio stations. MDDA does train people in the community radio stations. The challenge that we have in community radio stations, honorable members, is that the sooner you train the people in those community radio stations, the sooner the private sector takes them, because they are a cheap resource. They are not as expensive as they will get them somewhere, but they have been trained in a manner that they are able to actually go and shine in bigger radio stations, and particularly that they don't get paid. They just get some stipend. Some of them in these community radio stations are just there really offering a community service. It really places a huge challenge that the sooner you have trained them, the sooner they are capable of moving on into the commercial space, and then they are lost into the community radio stations. We do train because part and parcel of the issues that we have is governance issues, and then management issues in those community radio stations, and those that do manage to get that, they move on, and then we have to train the next batch. So the training does happen, and I think that is the issue. The last thing that there was a hint that maybe MDDA could stand surety or sign on behalf of these community radio stations. Honorable members and other colleagues, MDDA is in no capacity or ability to sign or stand surety for these community radio stations, because it will mean that if MDDA does that, it must then have the money to pay, because we know that these community radio stations won't be able to pay. So the various interactions that are happening between the minister and the two ministers must potentially give us an indication on how best we can do that. If MDDA is expected to stand surety, then the substantial amount of money that will be accumulated through debts must then be provided to MDDA to be able to onward pay, because without that, MDDA doesn't have any other means to raise the funding to honor those obligations. Thanks so much, Chair.
Thank you, Prof. DM?
Thanks, Chair. I think all questions were answered. Only one that is left is a question raised by Honorable Mulala on capacity training. Honorable Mulala, we do have capacity training programs that we do with MDDA that focuses on various issues. Key areas are on governance, marketing, and advertising, as well as financial management to our radio stations. Lastly, Chair, Let me welcome all the comments and the inputs raised by portfolio committee members. As the department, we are looking forward to work with the portfolio committee and to attend all the challenges that we have and fast track the implementation of the work that we must do. Thank you, Chair.
Can we then get Sentech and the SABC? You want to follow up now, Honorable Mdakane?
If you do allow me, Comrade Chair.
Yes, you can do that so that we close on this one.
Of course, and also if you are kind to grant me a permission not to switch on my video camera.
Yes,
I want Chair to make just a follow-up to Prof. Because he has raised an issue that the more they train on the ground and people are able then to move, I really want to make a point that they must train more. They must train more, because if they train, they empower people that are able to move. I accept, of course, the problem that they are cheaper than those. I take the point. But I think that we should allow them to train more. But Prof, another point that I want to raise is a point that is not really about Sentech, but is a point that I want to raise that always sometimes worries me. Because I do think, Prof, that those of you who are located in department, particularly at administrative level, they should be assisting us as members of parliament, broadly speaking, lawmakers, to identify areas where the lawmaking is not assisting you to address the problems earlier on. Because if the problem sometimes the policy gap, then the lawmakers are able to do that. We deal with a number of stations, when in fact the number of stations is not an issue. An issue is a policy gap that we have desired. Therefore, you take too long, can take us 20 years. But if you are able to assist us to say, this area, this is a challenge, we need members of parliament to deal with it, and we can be focused better to ensure that there's smooth running of the entire state in a manner that there are no gaps between what we are doing here, who are lawmakers, and yourself, who are dealing with management issues. I think really we should be able to do that, because on many issues that we have raised, many of them, there are policy gaps that I think it should have been identified early for us to know that these are policy gaps. As lawmakers, this is what really can assist us to ensure that we improve in terms of the delivery of services to the masses of the people on the ground. I think, to me, would be a good idea in future that we should consider Professor and the team that is working here, let alone, of course, the ministers, the deputy ministers. They should be assisting to do that. Because it has been always my view that then the lawmakers will make more impact when we know exactly what are the issues that make it difficult for you to do better on the ground in an efficient and effective way. I think, to me, if we can do that, can be very helpful, at least for us who are located in the legislature rather than in the executive. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mdakane. I'm not sure if Board Chair, Prof, you'd want to come back, or you've noted the comment.
No, point taken, Chair. I think that it's a point well made.
Thank you. We now get to the Sentech and the SABC.
Thank you, Chair. I've noted a number of questions. I'll start with the ones posed by Honorable Mazone on service availability during load shedding. This is certainly one of the top risks that we had noted operationally, and had set aside a significant budget to address this. And this has been observed even in terms of costs that we've incurred in this regard during load shedding and ensuring that our service remains available. And In terms of the contracted sites, our service availability has remained at around 99.8%. There are those sites where contracted availability from a continuity perspective, it's not contracted by broadcasters. And for those particular ones, we're currently not measuring those. But in terms of ensuring service availability, I can certainly assure Honorable Mazone that we have ensured that availability continues even during load shedding. However, there's also been risks that has manifested in some of these sites due to security post linked to it in terms of thefts of some of the equipments for backup. And as a result, in replacing that, we have also responded timeously for that. I'll also speak to the question posed by Honorable Bodlani in that how old is the 91 million debt by community broadcasters? This debt is quite old. I think it goes to certainly beyond 6 years. And there's some history to it because at some point there was an acknowledgement of debt from the MDDA to settle this particular debt. And also as Sentech, we also had an appreciation of various interventions that were being put in place, which included training that has been acknowledged. But I think as she correctly observed, from a financial sustainability perspective, it became necessary and through engagements. And we've also indicated that when we went on nationwide engagements with these community broadcasters, we went there with a partner such as MDDA.
Mr. Krisha, please mute. Mr. Krisha, mute, please, or ICT muted.
I've muted him, Chairperson. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. And in that, and hence right now, in terms of the engagement and stakeholder engagement of reaching out to the community broadcasters to sign the acknowledgement of debt, we have gone out with the MDDA and try and get that. And as we've reported, there are those that have signed these acknowledgements, and some have had to restructure, and some are following the arrangements that they've committed to. So that's the context to that 91 million. And all of this is in as much as it is a balancing act, it's also a prudence to ensure long-term sustainability overall. I'll also talk to the point that Honorable Bodlani raised in terms of the terminal value of the 11 million, which is included in the presentation. That 11 million is the residual value of the assets that Sentech owns for transmission, signal transmission, that is for community broadcasters. So in terms of the...
remove, Krisha, please. Remove. Otherwise the meeting is disrupted.
Thank you, Chair. So these are assets that are owned by Sentech and are on our assets register. And in terms of our operating model, we on charge that onto as part of our pricing model. So these assets are owned by Sentech. And in terms of the questions or comments or that we raised by Honorable Mulala, I think you are correct, sir, in terms of what is the estimated timeline on these engagements that we're having between the SABC and Sentech, because at some stage an agreement has to be reached. And I think when Mr. Lishope was presenting, he indicated the delegated subcommittees of the board, 2 boards and executives are due to make a report which the respective boards are going to consider by month end. And I can certainly then indicate that post the consideration of that report, there would be engagements with the shareholders, and that would follow through also to the committee. And I also appreciate what is also indicated in terms of for the 40 odd stations that have not come forward despite request or engagements to come forward and sign settlement agreements. We should look at possibly engaging and encouraging them to come forward, because it is vital that there is some acknowledgement of debt, because otherwise, in terms of carrying out our mandate, we are expected also to be financially sustainable. So certainly agree with the comment that Honorable Mlala has made, and we're going to continue to engage them to ensure that some of them can at least come forward. We have been very accommodative in terms of the settlement agreements that we've been signing with the community broadcasters, again, to ensure and understanding and appreciating that this is there's a critical role they play. And hence some of the settlement agreement are quite accommodative and extended. So certainly say we're gonna continue in engaging those. I'm gonna welcome Mr. Lishope. Tebogo, you may add anything you might wanna add on any of the points that were raised. Kindly come in.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, you did cover most of the questions, Chair. I'll just be extending on one question raised by Honorable Member Botlani on what happens to equipment related to community broadcasting. Honorable Botlani, there's two parts to the value chain of the equipment, the studio equipment and the transmission equipment. In terms of the transmission equipment, the control is fully under Sentech, and we establish this equipment and then recover its cost from the community broadcasters. So when a community broadcaster service is switched off, this equipment belongs to Sentech. The studio one's the one that will be, I think, under control of community broadcasters and MDDA. Perhaps MDDA could expand a little bit broader on that issue. Yes, Chair, I think we've covered all the issues that related to Sentech in this regards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. SABC.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you once again for giving us this opportunity. I will go briefly and respond to the questions that were raised by members, but I also have Ian, our COO, on the line, and Yolandi also is present to deal with some of the questions in detail. Honorable Mulala, I welcome the comments that have been made around the SABC, where you are suggesting that we should have a session where the SABC can really detail what its challenge is. You made reference to SABC failing to rise to the occasion. It's something that we look forward to, and I think really it would give us a platform to table our challenges in front of everyone, so that everyone can understand what the challenges are, especially around the issues of unfunded mandate, and also, answer to the bailout question as to whether the bailout funds were utilized for what they were meant for. So we're quite keen on that. I've been covered by my sister Suzani around the issue of timelines on the engagements between SABC and Sentech. I think she has given comfort that we are not going to engage forever. There are timelines that have been set for those engagements, and Minister also is driving that one quite hard. And then there was a question by Honorable Ndakane, or a comment about TV licenses versus satellite dishes. how is it that the SABC is failing to collect TV licenses. Ian will come later and explain in detail what we are doing, but I would just like to make a few observations around that. As the SABC, we invest a lot of money into TV license collection. The data that we collect and the resources that we plow into recovering the debt, it comes at a huge cost. Right now, we are busy appointing debt collecting agencies because the ones we've had previously, their contracts have lapsed. But I think what is at the center of this failure or this perceived failure of the SABC to collect TV license, when people do not pay TV license, we don't switch them off. But if you don't pay your subscription, even for a month with DSTV, you get switched off. That is one of the reasons why people do not pay, because they know we're not going to switch them off. The people that we are referring to in the rural areas, in the hinterland of this country, and townships, even in informal settlements that have satellite dishes on their homes, a lot of people would subscribe. Even they would take the lowest package on the DSTV because they want to access SABC TV, because by doing so they are able then to get a better signal. And this is a pattern that we had observed before the DTT, but even right now, because people are not able to be migrated fully, and therefore they would subscribe because they want to access. And we have statistics that show that most of the programs that South Africans watch, using these other platforms, are still SABC programs. So SABC programs are still featuring strongly in the top 10 most watched programs in South African television, including our vernacular bulletins. The question by Honorable Mazoni about collecting societies, I think, first of all, Indicom is not a collecting society. They are an NPC, and they operate more like a lobby group, which stands for Interests of Artists. So as SABC, we pay collecting societies like SAMRO, like IMPRA, SAMPRA, for the usage of music on our platforms. And actually, this is one of the costs that were covered by the bailout, because we had a huge backlog on royalties, which we have since covered. So depending on the type of royalty the CMOs are collecting, we engage with each CMO and we make sure that we pay them the royalty that they collect, which they then distribute to artists. We can't speak about their operations and how they then distribute these royalties, because the admin of CMOs is managed by the CMOs. So yes, we do interact with Indicom from time to time, but they are not collecting from SABC. They just keep us in check, like other lobby groups that we find in the country in terms of the royalties that we pay. I'll hand over to Ian right now to also elaborate on some of the questions and comments that were made by members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll respond firstly on the TV licenses from Honorable Mazoni. Yes, the reasons why people are not paying TV licenses are multi-causational. There are obviously some that are using the reasons for the content not speaking to them. I think it's important to note that we have 19 radio stations and broadcasting in 19 different languages. However, we only have 3 television stations, and it needs to cater for all of the official languages. So obviously, the comment around content not speaking to certain people would always be there on the table. But I think it's a misnomer in terms of we're calling it a television license. In essence, it is a household license for both television and radio. And although people might not be consuming certain content of ours on certain of our TV channels, they certainly are consuming our radio content as well. Also, we subsidize, the community radio stations as well. So I think it's just important to note that. Also, one of the big impacts on television licenses has also been recently the declines is the analog switch off. Obviously, if we are switching off televisions and people don't have access to TV, they're not going to renew their television license. The other one it's a small at the moment impact, but it can become greater depending on the timing of it, and that is the SABC bill. So that would be changing the financial model of the SABC and obviously moving away from a TV license to a more household levy. Some people might feel that if this is going to change, why must I bother to renew my license? So if there's a delay in that going to Parliament and then obviously becoming a law, that could have an impact as well. And then in general, obviously, we all know that there's a culture of non-payment as well, not just towards the SABC. In terms of Honourable Malala's questions, and we welcome that, we will definitely deal with it in greater detail in the session we're going to have. But we concur 100% with Sentech's sentiments that there is a sense of urgency from both boards to resolve this matter as soon as possible and outside of the CONCOM, although the matter is running in parallel. The discussions are open and robust, and we hope that we would come to a resolution quite soon. We're certainly not asking for another bailout, and we don't even want to consider that. There's no risk of us not paying salaries. In terms of if we resolve the matter with Sentech and the cost is reduced, that is going to be the contributing factor, as well as what we are asking for is a compensation grant for the loss of audience and impact on our revenue due to us giving up the spectrum in the 5 provinces, and if that can come from the sale of the spectrum, that's what we're asking for, not a bailout, and just for the duration of that impacting the organization. And then obviously, the sooner the SABC bill comes into effect and our unfunded mandate is changed to a different funding model, that will resolve the financial sustainability of the organization. I think it's important to note that in our turnaround plans, both the official one and the revenue mitigation plans, there was at that point in time an extraneous variables which has now become major realities that was not factored into any of those planning, and that is the analog switch off, load shedding. And you must note that our competitors have the ability of having multi-channels, so anything that the advertisers are losing out on, they have another channel that they can rebroadcast that. We don't have that opportunity, so we have got to either give them added value or pay penalties for that loss of audiences during those slots. And then the previous bailout, the lion's share of that went to Sentech. Over 500 million of that went to Sentech. Thank you, Chair. I hand back to you.
Thank you. Maybe just check if I may have left a hand that was trying to follow up on any matter that couldn't come out clear. We give the CFO first, SABC.
Good
Committee
morning.
support will then help me to check if I may be leaving any NPI.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and members, my executive directors and others on the platform. Just a brief response to one of the specific questions Honourable Malala raised, but suffice to say, as the acting GCO indicated, we look forward to an in-depth engagement on how we managed and spent the bailout funding, as well as the benefit realisation that has taken place and will continue to take place. We are finalising reports in that respect. And just to indicate that the bailout has been rigorously managed and tracked and monitored, not only internally right up to a board level, but also in support of or supported by a committee that encompasses also National Treasury and DCDT on a monthly basis. So we look forward to that engagement. On the question of the sale of assets specifically, and this is in reference to non-core assets that follow on our property audit that took place in 2018-19, the disposals have proceeded. There were a few challenges along the way, but we are currently in the process of the transfer that's being lodged at the deeds office for the final properties. Lastly, there is a court case on Friday, in fact, following the postponement approximately a year ago, to deal with a few of the houses that remain illegally occupied, but the majority of the other properties have been or are in the process of being transferred. Thank you, Chair. Back to you.
Board Chair, SABC, Board Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think I just want to maybe bring an addition to the comments that that the colleagues have made, in particular the question of the bailout. Just to add on what the COO has said. So practically, we indeed are looking at a compensation of the losses suffered due to AZO for the time period that we are anticipating the impact to be towards the full transition to digital, which is scheduled for December 2024. But in that process, the question of the SABC bill being finalized becomes critical in the sense that it then assists with the viability of the SABC funding model. But having indicated, or rather having engaged in the last meeting, where it was indicated that that bill still requires to go back to Cabinet and then find its way to Parliament, and also noting the timelines for priority bills within the parliamentary system having passed. If that bill doesn't get processed on time, we may find ourselves in a situation where the discussion around a bailout is inevitable. So I think it's important to make that particular fact, because so long as the funding model question is not resolved, and where we're seated, the SABC bill is the immediate, avenue to address that funding model question, the bailout conversation may become necessary and urgent as well. So I thought it's an important point to make, so that, if we come back to the committee and introduce this discussion, it doesn't become a strange conversation as it were. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Tembinkosi, there's any member who has risen a hand.
Chairperson, I don't see any hands from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to be sure that I don't leave anybody behind. I think, honorable members, you've raised questions, comments. Those would have been responded to. And I think we need to get to wind up on this item, including the guidance that would have been asked for. I think what is clear is that from a point of observation, that there are pressing challenges as it relates to signal distribution. From a point of tariffs, affordability, and those would need both immediate intervention as well as long-term solution to the challenges that are faced, especially by the community broadcasting, as well as the SABC. I think going forward, what we may need to do then is to really leave the meeting with an understanding that the committee supports all interventions. This includes even looking at the possibility of using the existing legislation as stated in the report to ensure that community media and or SABC is assisted through USAF when the two ministries get to an engagement. But given the urgency of the matter, would really appreciate to get feedback by end of the month on such engagements. This includes what Sentech board chair, Ms. Budau, would have raised, that they are also not looking at endless discussions even on the side of the SABC Sentech dispute, that by end of the month, at least there should be reports on how the boards would have decided. So we expect the same on the side of the ministries coming together to resolve the matter. But the other matter that should be clear, I did listen to you very well, board chair of MDDA, Prof. Matebole, that there may be issues of legislative gaps, and these are being attended to from a funding point of view in terms of the green paper, what the white paper later on, in as far as this advert spend that GCIS needs to mobilize. But as we speak, currently there's a position of government about the 30%. I think we should make a distinction there between issues of the will or those that have to implement this policy direction of government, whilst we wait for other things to happen. But there's an important point, though, in that, which I think maybe Sentech in these discussions, it will be important that it be considered. That even if you do this mobilization at this point, I think what you are making as a point from MDDA is that those that are already offline, who are off air, who are no longer eligible even for that mobilization, and therefore those communities stand to lose. For that reason, the issue of considering some moratorium, it's something to look at. And therefore, I think as a way forward, even on that point, surely the committee would agree that what Prof. Matebole would have raised, it gets to be important. And this is what he raised. That in any way, if you are to make any debt repayment arrangement, it's based on affordability. And surely those that can make, they can't get adverts, they can't get this, there's no revenue that they would get. And therefore there's no reason to come forward. And that maybe as a way forward, this should be a matter between Sentech, the MDDA, GCIS, as well as DCDT, in this discussion that we talked about with ministers, that probably then MDDA, at least with assurance of that support, is able to do that on behalf of those the community broadcasting entities that are in the communities. This will also, I think, afford an opportunity even to the MDDA to make a proper assessment, firstly, of whether indeed governance structures are there and everything else is there before we even think about such assistance. Because those members were with the team that went to, I think it is the Free State. We went to one community radio, I think it's Muteo also. We got a sense there of what happens sometimes, is that people leave this to close, they are off air, and then a new application is made. The equipment and everything else is left with those that the board that was running, and they own it. And sometimes it gets to be family members, it gets to be also people who work for the state running the same community radio stations. So I'm just saying it will also give you space to really look at that 44 or so, whether they still exist, the structures are in place, and is still kept. And in that score, at least stand on knowing that the intervention you're making is quite sustainable. And like I'm saying, relying on us finding these solutions that have been put forward, mobilization of government ad spend, as well as the possibility of using existing law to access the use of funds. The other point I think we should be clear on is with regard to the SABC coming back to the committee. We've already said this in the beginning, but I think in the discussions, it's quite clear it's a matter that's quite urgent. And there's a way forward. Again, we would need by end of the week that the SABC presents a case on whether they would want the session, like I said earlier, to be closed because of commercially sensitive matters, outline those in terms of the rules, or partially in that regard. Or it will just be a normal open session because there are no commercially sensitive matters. So that we are able, based on that, to set up the date, which should not be later than the first week of October, knowing that that will be the time for constituency period. So we would need to make an application for approval well in advance. So that will be by end of the week. That we must have at least that response from the SABC if they will have any intention of a meeting that will be partially or totally closed based on the commercial matters they need to put forward. However, what is quite clear is that it's not only about the problems that the SABC is experiencing, the proposals about the funding model for the SABC to also feature in this. But as well as members are interested in the report on the bailout. And I think the bailout is not looked only from a point of rands and cents spent, but it is how that would have helped the SABC on those areas that they said, if these areas are addressed, this is how the institution will turn around. We have also been seized with many of the complaints before when there was a to and fro about the board that's not appointed. I think at the time, Honorable Mlala, you'd remember that there was something like there have been 14 initiatives that looks at revenue. But these are subject to the board's approval. But at least give us also a sense that since you've taken over as a board, has the management been able to put those, and whether those are still relevant to be pursued at this point or not, right? And if they have not been presented, at least get a sense again whether they ever existed in any way. So we would need those to be also known by at least the public, because that they were aware of such discussions. And some of the matters raised, including the retrenchment, created a bit of tension even between the committee and the SABC, the unions, and so on. That at least those could be packaged. Of course, it's not only the SABC, because the SABC was responding to conditions imposed, and that there was also GTech that was put as a transaction advice to the bailout, as to whether they also played their role in assisting that you fulfill all those conditions in practical terms. So we'll need this by end of the week, like I'm saying, an indication so that we're able to set up the date in that regard. I think on these other matters from GCIS, We would also need, I think, an indication, Deputy Minister and the team, on what you've done with regard to the proposals that have been made. This includes the fact that we have raised it last week. That yes, we may have been receiving a third quarter and fourth quarter report, but we're already in another financial year. The matter about the MEC Charter, which needs to be gazetted, that all those problems are now out of the way and you are able to actually gazette. Because from your presentation, there lies another opportunity to help fund the community broadcasters by extending this to also what private sector could still contribute going forward. So we would need a bit there of you moving with speed. But what comes out clear as I conclude on this matter is that it will be difficult to get to the elections, celebrate so many years of the MDDA, 30 years of democracy, as well as the national elections in 2024, with the limping broadcasting sector, especially where the state could still come in and assure South Africans that the reach will be also to poor areas and would not have a problem of signal distribution and so on. So it's a matter that really you must live with. Honorable Mlala, in his input, indicated that irrespective of the concept that you use, I think what gets to be important, whether you say it's a bailout, whether you say it is a intervention fund or compensation, but the important point is the time that you use to get that matter in the system and that the necessary lobbying happens with a clear understanding, though, that Treasury has already given an indication that we may not have the resources that everybody would want to have. And I think that was the indication as the budget was dealt with. So we need to move with speed again on that matter. But it can't be that the SABC or even the community broadcasters would collapse in the hands of the leadership that is on this call, and that includes Parliament. So we have to do, I think, everything possible in that regard. I take it that then the matters are quite clear. Of course, would allow you to stay on the line if you so wish, as we get to the next item, which will be quite a short item of the committee. But of course, if you are pressed up because you need to respond to all the matters raised, we should gladly allow you to leave the platform and get some execution with speed in that regard. So that will be it. We really thank you for coming before the committee, in particular the political leadership, because we really do want the political leadership to take political responsibility of what is happening in the department and the entities that report to them. Thank you, as we get the committee support to flight the next item. The next item, honorable members, as I said, it's been coming. I'm not sure how many times this year, like to clear the backlog of this determination. The item is prepared as you can see in the same format. So as for the committee to agree or disagree and be able to at the same time adopt the report so that it's sent back to the House. So would you do the page by page? As the report, honorable members, I see on your message, Honorable Mlala, and I'm sure other members may be affected by what you are raising, and I'm sure you'll assist us quickly on this item. If there are no issues on the report, can I get at least a mover and seconder for the adoption of the report?
I move, Chair.
Honorable Bodlani moves. Can I get a seconder? Honorable Mlala seconds. Any objection in us adopting the report? No objection. And the report is agreed to and will be sent to the House accordingly. Mr. Ngoma, am I leaving any other item?
Good afternoon, Chairperson. No, Chairperson, those were all the agendas for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, honorable members and the committee support. I think we've tried to be quite qualitative with time and inputs made. Of course, we must just be ready, honorable members, like I said, that there will be political applications made in the committee today that will make that follow-up quicker and convene accordingly. So we'd make those applications to make time for us as the committee to really strengthen our oversight over the entities. With that having been said, thanks once again for prioritizing the committee. Yes.
My apologies. Maybe my apologies is a matter, very important one, Chair.
Yes.
About to inform the members of the bereavement that we have in your office. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Sorry for that. I'm sure you do hear what Mr. Ngoma is saying. We've just learned, I think because we didn't get this when we were in the oversight in PAL. I think the following day would have been a Sunday. I'm sure you'd have seen this by now, that we lost one of the staff members, the executive secretary, the chair, Mr. Wandile Mguga, who has not been well for some time. Of course, would have, through those that visited, sent our condolences on behalf of myself as the chair and the committee in that regard. So members, please be informed. Of course, he will be missed from the committee in terms of committee work. We hope that the family will remain courageous to proceed with preparations and everything else that relates to funeral arrangements, which have not been cleared by the time we came to the meeting. Thanks, Mr. Ngoma, for that reminder. May his soul rest in peace. Am I still audible? Like I said, we'll then officially adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.